You ever hear your whole life end through a wall thinner than a lawyer's excuse? I did, on a Tuesday night in October, standing in my own kitchen like some discount detective while my wife whispered sweet betrayals into her phone. He's clueless. Room 303, as always. Can't wait for you tonight. Mira's voice carried that particular tone she used to reserve for me. Soft, intimate, promising. Now it belonged to someone else, and I stood there holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, listening to my marriage dissolve in real time. My name is Soren Kellor, and until that moment, I thought I knew who I was. 42 years old, union electrician, decent husband to a woman climbing the legal ladder faster than I could keep up. We lived in Millbrook, one of those fading New England towns where the factories closed, but the pride never quite left. Our house sat on Elm Street, white paint peeling like old skin, surrounded by neighbors who knew everyone's business and shared it over morning coffee. Mira had changed since her promotion to senior associate at Brennan & Associates. The glass and chrome law office downtown might as well have been another planet compared to the construction sites where I spent my days. She'd started working late, attending firm parties I wasn't invited to, speaking a language of billable hours and client development that excluded me entirely. I set the coffee cup down carefully, the ceramic clicking against granite countertops that Mira had insisted we install last year. Everything in our kitchen screamed upward mobility. Stainless steel appliances, subway tile backsplash, pendant lights that cost more than my weekly paycheck. I felt like an intruder in my own home. The phone conversation continued in the living room. I moved closer to the doorway, my work boots silent on hardwood floors. I'd refinished myself. Derek, you know I can't stay long tonight. Soren thinks I'm at Jessica's reviewing depositions. Derek. I knew that name. Derek Harrow, another lawyer at Mira's firm. Cocky guy with perfect teeth and a BMW that cost more than most people's houses. I'd met him at the firm's Christmas party, where he'd looked through me like I was furniture. Trust me, he won't suspect anything. He's too busy with his boxing and his beer to notice what I'm doing. The boxing comment stung because it was partially true. After 12-hour days running electrical through commercial buildings, I found peace at Murphy's Gym downtown. Old-school place with heavy bags and speed bags, where sweat mattered more than money. It was my sanctuary, my therapy, my escape from feeling inadequate in Mira's increasingly sophisticated world. But I noticed plenty. I noticed how she'd started wearing perfume to work. I noticed the new lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom. I noticed how her phone had suddenly acquired a password and lived face down on every surface. I love you too, she whispered into the phone. See you in an hour. The line went quiet. I retreated to the kitchen, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, and made a decision that would change everything. Room 303. That was specific enough. The Riverside Motel sat on Route 9, a collection of brown doors facing a parking lot that had seen better decades. It catered to traveling salesmen, construction crews, and apparently cheating spouses who needed somewhere discreet for their meetings. I parked my pickup truck behind a dumpster and waited. Mira's Honda Accord arrived at 8:30. She parked directly in front of room 303, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and walked to the door with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. Derek's BMW pulled up 10 minutes later. He knocked twice, the door opened, and they disappeared inside together. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching their shadows move across the curtained window, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic deception, planned and executed with the precision Mira brought to her legal work. I took photos with my phone, license plates, timestamps, the motel sign with room 303 visible in the frame, evidence, documentation. The electrician in me understood the importance of proper documentation. As I prepared to leave, a security camera mounted above the motel office swiveled in my direction. The red recording light blinked like an accusation. Someone was watching the watchers. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We saw you. Watch yourself." I drove home through empty streets, past houses where normal couples lived normal lives, and tried to figure out who else was playing this game. Jules Brennan ran the best independent garage in Millbrook, which meant he fixed everything from farm equipment to luxury imports with equal skill and creative profanity. He was also the only person I knew who understood computers better than carburetors. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Jules said when I walked into his shop the next morning. He was elbow-deep in the engine of a Subaru Outback, but he could read faces as well as diagnostic codes. Worse, someone ran over my marriage. I told him everything: the phone call, the motel, the mysterious text message. Jules listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grunting acknowledgement. When I finished, he wiped his hands on a shop rag and pulled out his laptop. "Mira still using the same cloud storage account you set up for family photos?" "As far as I know." "Password? Tess Love 2018. Our daughter's name and birth year." Jules's fingers moved across the keyboard like a concert pianist, hitting familiar notes. People never change their passwords. Basic security mistake. Within minutes, he'd accessed Mira's cloud account. What we found there made the motel affair look like amateur hour. Screenshots of group text messages between Mira, her friend Jessica Walsh, and another woman named Lauren Kendrick. The conversation thread was titled Operation Cleanup and dated back 3 months. Jessica: "You sure about this plan? It's pretty extreme." Mira: "He's holding me back. The partners notice these things. I need to be seen as serious, not married to some blue-collar nobody." Lauren: "Divorce is expensive, especially if he fights for custody." Mira: "He won't fight if he's the bad guy. Men like Soren have fragile egos, push the right buttons, and they self-destruct." The messages detailed a systematic campaign to isolate me, document concerning behavior, and build a case for an abusive marriage that existed only in their imagination. "This is sociopathic," Jules muttered, scrolling through weeks of planning. "They're treating your life like a legal brief." The most recent messages were the worst. Mira: "Derek thinks we should accelerate the timeline. His private investigator friend can help with documentation." Jessica: "What kind of documentation?" Mira: "The kind that makes judges very protective of wives and children." I stared at the screen, understanding dawning like a sunrise nobody wanted to see. "They're going to frame me." "Looks like it. Question is, for what?" We didn't have to wait long to find out. That afternoon, I was installing outlet boxes in a new office complex when my foreman, Tony Ricci, pulled me aside. "Soren, I got a call this morning. Someone from your wife's law firm. They're concerned about your mental state, said you've been making threats." "That's complete nonsense, Tony. You know me." "I do know you. That's why I'm giving you a heads up instead of sending you home. But if I get another call, or if this escalates, I'll have to take action. Company liability and all that." The frame was already in motion. I drove home through autumn streets lined with maple trees dropping leaves like evidence of time passing. Our house looked the same from the outside. White colonial with black shutters, American flag hanging from the front porch, lawn mowed and edged with the precision that came from taking pride in small things. Inside, Mira was cooking dinner. She smiled when I walked in, the same smile she'd worn for 15 years of marriage. "How was your day, honey?" The casual deception was breathtaking. She stood there in our kitchen, wearing an apron I'd bought her for Christmas, preparing a meal for a man she was systematically destroying, and her performance was flawless. "Fine," I said. "Yours?" "Busy. Depositions all day. Jessica and I are working late tomorrow night, reviewing discovery materials for the Henderson case." Another lie, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been caught. We ate dinner while our daughter Tess told us about her day at school. She was 13, caught between childhood and adolescence, still young enough to believe her parents were good people who loved each other. I watched Mira interact with our daughter, genuine affection, real maternal instinct, and tried to reconcile this woman with the one planning my destruction. After Tess went upstairs to do homework, Mira and I cleaned the kitchen together. Normal domestic routine, performed by two people living in completely different realities. Soren, can we talk? Here it comes, I thought. I've been thinking about us lately. About our marriage. Oh? You seem angry all the time. Distant. Tess has noticed it too. The gaslighting was expert level. She was planting seeds for future accusations, establishing a narrative of marital discord that would justify whatever came next. I'm not angry, Mira. Just tired. Maybe you should talk to someone, a counselor or therapist, for your own peace of mind. Translation: create a paper trail of mental health concerns. I'll think about it, I said. That night, I lay in bed next to my wife while she slept peacefully beside me. Her breathing was deep and regular, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience. I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. The game was already underway. I was just figuring out the rules. The restraining order arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked embarrassed to be serving papers to someone he'd known since high school. Sorry about this, Soren. Just doing my job. The photographs were attached to the petition. Mira's bruised arms, a swollen lip, finger marks around her throat. Professional quality images that documented violence I'd never committed against a woman I'd never touched in anger. According to the sworn affidavit, I'd been escalating for months. Verbal abuse, controlling behavior, threats against our daughter's safety. The incident that triggered the restraining order allegedly occurred 2 nights ago, after I'd been drinking heavily and confronted Mira about imaginary affairs. The timeline was perfect, the details were specific, the bruises were real. I had 24 hours to vacate the premises. This is insane, I told Jules, sitting in his office above the garage while he read through the legal documents. I've never laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice around Tess. Doesn't matter what actually happened, matters what she can prove happened. But how did she get those bruises? Jules pulled up security camera footage on his computer. That's what we need to figure out. Your house have any cameras? No. Mira always said they were too expensive. What about your neighbors? The Hendersons have a doorbell camera, points toward our driveway. Let's go talk to them. Margaret Henderson had lived next door for 30 years. She'd watched me grow up, attended my wedding, babysat Tess when she was younger. If anyone would believe my side of the story, it would be her. Oh, Soren, she said when she opened her door. I heard about the restraining order. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Henderson, I need your help. I never hurt Mira. Someone is setting me up. Her face showed the internal conflict of someone caught between loyalty and legal liability. I want to help you, dear, but Mira showed me the pictures. Those bruises look terrible. Can we check your doorbell camera? See if it recorded anything unusual the night this supposedly happened? I already looked. Mira asked me to check 2 days ago, said she was worried about prowlers. Of course she did. The footage from that night is missing. Camera malfunctioned, apparently. Mira said it happens sometimes with these wireless systems. Another piece of evidence conveniently eliminated. I spent that night in my truck, parked behind Murphy's gym, trying to figure out my next move. The restraining order prohibited me from going within 500 feet of my own house, my wife, or my daughter. I was suddenly homeless in the town where I'd lived my entire life. The next morning, I checked into the Riverside Motel. Room 301, 2 doors down from where my wife conducted her affair. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang while I was unpacking a duffel bag of clothes I'd grabbed from my truck's storage box. Dad? Tess? Honey, how are you? Mom says you're sick, that you need help. The conversation was stilted, careful. Tess was 13, old enough to sense adult complications, but too young to understand them. I'm fine, sweetheart. This is just a misunderstanding that will get worked out. Mom says you might not be able to live with us anymore. We'll see. I love you, Tess. I love you too, Dad. But maybe you should get the help Mom thinks you need. After she hung up, I sat on the motel room bed and stared at the wall that separated me from room 303. Somewhere in this mess, there had to be evidence of what really happened. Proof that the bruises were self-inflicted, that the timeline was fabricated, that I was being framed by people who'd turned deception into an art form. I called the one person who might have answers. Mom? My mother had passed away 2 months ago, but her house remained exactly as she'd left it. I'd been meaning to clean it out, deal with her possessions, but work and life had gotten in the way. Now I wondered if she'd left behind anything that might help. The key was still under the ceramic frog by her front door. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Her reading glasses on the kitchen table, coffee mug in the sink, stack of mail she'd never opened. I went through her papers systematically. Bank statements, insurance policies, medical records from her final months battling cancer. In her bedroom closet, behind boxes of Christmas decorations, I found something unexpected. A shoebox containing receipts, instruction manuals, and warranty information for a home security system. Purchased 6 months ago, installed by Henderson Home Security 3 weeks before she passed away. My mother had never mentioned installing cameras. The paperwork included cloud storage login credentials written in her careful handwriting. I used Jules' laptop to access the account. 57 video files organized by date and location. Cameras in her living room, kitchen, and, according to the installation diagram, one hidden camera with a view of our backyard, positioned to monitor the bird feeders she'd maintained for decades. The camera that watched the bird feeders also had a clear view of our kitchen window. I scrolled through the files, looking for the date of my alleged assault. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., exactly when the police report claimed I was attacking my wife. The footage showed our kitchen, illuminated by the pendant lights Mira loved. She was alone, standing at the sink. As I watched, she opened a drawer and removed something. A wooden spoon with a heavy handle. What happened next made my stomach turn. Mira systematically struck herself with the wooden spoon. Arms first, methodical blows that would leave the exact bruising pattern shown in the photographs. She paused to examine her work, adjusting angles, ensuring even coverage. Then she moved to her face. 3 careful strikes to her left cheek, 2 more to her lip. She checked her reflection in the kitchen window, nodded with satisfaction, and photographed her injuries with her phone. The entire performance lasted 12 minutes. I watched it 3 times, documenting timestamps, downloading the file to multiple devices. This was evidence of perjury, filing false reports, conspiracy to commit fraud. But it was also something else. Proof that the woman I'd loved for 15 years was capable of violence against herself to destroy me. I had my smoking gun. Now I needed to figure out how to use it. The family court hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. According to the paperwork, Mira was seeking emergency custody of Tess, supervised visitation rights for me, and a psychological evaluation to determine my fitness as a parent. I hired Patricia Vance, one of the few family law attorneys in town who wasn't connected to Mira's firm. She was expensive, experienced, and skeptical of my chances. The burden of proof in these cases heavily favors the accuser, she explained during our first meeting. Your wife has documentation, photographs, and witness statements. What do you have? I showed her the security camera footage. Patricia watched the 12-minute video in silence, her expression shifting from professional skepticism to genuine shock. This is extraordinary evidence, she said finally, but we need to be careful about how we present it. The judge will want to verify authenticity, chain of custody, technical specifications. Whatever you need. There's something else. I've been asking around about Reed Fallon, your wife's attorney. He has a reputation for aggressive tactics and close relationships with certain judges. What kind of relationships? The kind that make fair hearings difficult to guarantee. Over the weekend, Jules and I conducted our own investigation. We followed Derek Harrow from his downtown condo to his office, documenting his routine. We photographed him entering room 303 at the Riverside Motel, meeting Mira for their regular Tuesday appointment. More importantly, we discovered Derek's weakness. His BMW was his pride and joy, detailed weekly, parked in reserved spaces, protected like a religious artifact. On Sunday night, we visited the parking garage beneath his condo building. I didn't damage the car. Instead, I left a gift on his windshield. Printed copies of the motel photographs, along with a note. Your girlfriend is a liar and a fraud. Thought you should know. Monday morning, Derek called in sick to work. The hearing began at 9 a.m. Tuesday in a courtroom that smelled like furniture polish and fear. Judge Margaret Foster presided, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for protecting children at all costs. Mira sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a conservative blue dress that suggested vulnerability and respectability. She'd covered most of the fake bruises with makeup, but enough remained visible to support her narrative. Reed Fallon presented her case with theatrical precision. Photographs were entered into evidence. Police reports were read aloud. Character witnesses testified to my increasingly erratic behavior. Jessica Walsh took the stand and described my threatening phone calls and obsessive surveillance of Mira's activities. She was convincing, sincere, and completely fabricating every word. Lauren Kendrick followed with testimony about my drinking problem and violent outbursts at social gatherings I'd never attended. When it was my turn to present evidence, Patricia stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, we have video evidence that fundamentally contradicts the plaintiff's claims. The courtroom's video system displayed the security camera footage in high definition. Every detail was visible: Mira's methodical self-assault, her careful documentation, her satisfied examination of the results. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Reed Fallon objected, claiming the footage was illegally obtained, improperly authenticated, and potentially doctored. Judge Foster overruled him and ordered the video to continue playing. When it finished, she asked for a 15-minute recess. During the break, I watched Mira's composure crumble. She whispered frantically to Reed Fallon, who looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. Jessica and Lauren sat in the gallery, their faces pale with the recognition that their conspiracy had been exposed. When court resumed, Patricia presented additional evidence: the cloud storage records, the camera installation documentation, technical analysis proving the video's authenticity. Your Honor, she said, this footage proves that Mrs. Kellor committed perjury when she filed her initial complaint. She fabricated evidence of domestic abuse, filed false police reports, and attempted to manipulate this court's custody determination. Judge Foster studied the legal documents for several minutes before speaking. This is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered in 20 years on the bench. Mrs. Kellor, you will stand. Mira rose unsteadily, her lawyer beside her. Based on the evidence presented, I find that you have committed perjury, filing false reports, and contempt of this court. Bailiff, please take Mrs. Kellor into custody. The courtroom erupted. Reed Fallon protested loudly while bailiffs moved toward Mira, who looked around desperately for some escape that didn't exist. Furthermore, Judge Foster continued, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney for Criminal Prosecution and to the State Bar for investigation of Mr. Fallon's conduct. As the handcuffs clicked around Mira's wrists, she turned to look at me with an expression of pure hatred. The mask had finally fallen completely away. This isn't over, she said, as the bailiffs led her toward the door. But it was over. The custody order was reversed. The restraining order was dismissed. Reed Fallon was facing disbarment proceedings, Derek Harrow had already submitted his resignation to Brennan and Associates. I walked out of the courthouse into October sunlight, feeling like a man who'd been underwater for months and finally reached the surface. Tess was waiting in the courthouse hallway with a victim services advocate when I emerged from the courtroom. She looked confused, scared, and younger than her 13 years. "Dad? What's happening? Where are they taking Mom?" I knelt to her eye level, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom made some bad choices, sweetheart. She's going to have to face the consequences. But the bruises were fake. She hurt herself to make it look like I hurt her." The concept was too complex for a 13-year-old to fully grasp, but Tess was smart enough to understand that her world had changed forever. "Can I come home with you?" "Yes, we're going home." The drive back to Elm Street felt surreal. For 3 weeks, I'd been exiled from my own life, sleeping in motel rooms and living out of a duffel bag. Now, I was returning as the wrongly accused victim of an elaborate frame-up, with custody of a daughter who'd been manipulated into believing I was dangerous. Our house looked exactly the same from the outside, but inside, everything had changed. Mira's presence lingered in every room, her coffee mug in the sink, her legal briefs scattered across the dining room table, her perfume still faintly detectable in our bedroom. I packed her belongings methodically while Tess watched television downstairs. Clothes, toiletries, legal documents, the framed photographs of her law school graduation, evidence of a life that had been built on lies. The local news covered the story that evening. Millbrook attorney arrested for filing false abuse claims ran as the lead story, complete with footage of Mira being led from the courthouse in handcuffs. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting interviews, neighbors offering support, former friends who'd shunned me during the restraining order now eager to express their belief in my innocence. Jules stopped by with pizza and beer. We sat on my front porch, watching autumn darkness settle over the neighborhood, and tried to process what had happened. "You realize this is going to follow you forever," he said. "Small town like this, people remember everything. Let them remember. They'll remember that I was innocent. They'll also remember that you were accused. Some folks won't make the distinction." He was right, of course. Even complete vindication couldn't erase the stain of having been publicly accused of domestic violence. My reputation would recover, but it would never be quite the same. 2 weeks later, the district attorney's office filed formal charges against Mira: perjury in the first degree, filing false reports, conspiracy to commit fraud. Reed Fallon was suspended from practicing law pending a state bar investigation. Derek Harrow left town quietly, taking a position with a law firm in Boston, where his local reputation couldn't follow him. Jessica Walsh and Lauren Kendrick avoided criminal charges, but faced civil liability for their roles in the conspiracy. I chose not to pursue litigation. Revenge had already extracted its price. The aftermath was messier than the courtroom victory. Tess struggled with the revelation that her mother had orchestrated such elaborate deception. She started seeing a counselor, working through the complex emotions of loving someone who'd proven capable of terrible things. I returned to work, but the dynamic with my coworkers had shifted. Some treated me like a hero who'd beaten false accusations. Others seemed uncomfortable around me, as if proximity to such drama might be contagious. The house felt different too, larger and emptier without Mira's presence, but also cleaner somehow, as if removing her belongings had eliminated a contamination I hadn't realized was there. 6 months later, I received a letter from Mira's new attorney. She was seeking a plea agreement that would avoid prison time in exchange for full restitution and a public apology. She wanted to rebuild her relationship with Tess, to explain her actions and ask for forgiveness. I showed the letter to Tess, who was now 14 and more mature than any teenager should have to be. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think she made her choice when she decided to hurt herself to hurt you," Tess said. "I think some things can't be forgiven just because someone asks." The security cameras my mother installed remained active, quietly recording our daily routines. I'd considered removing them, but decided they should stay. Trust, I'd learned, required verification now. On quiet evenings, I sometimes drove past the Riverside Motel. Room 303 was usually occupied by traveling salesmen or construction crews, people with legitimate reasons for needing temporary accommodation. The ghosts of other people's betrayals had moved on to haunt different rooms. I never saw myself as a victim or a hero, just a man who'd been targeted by someone who'd mistaken his kindness for weakness, his trust for stupidity. The experience had taught me that the people closest to us are capable of the deepest deceptions, and that sometimes the only way to expose lies is to document everything. The legal system had worked, eventually. The truth had emerged, justice had been served, and I'd regained custody of my daughter and my reputation. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Tess was asleep upstairs, I sometimes wondered what would have happened if my mother hadn't installed those cameras. How long the frame-up might have continued. How many other men had been destroyed by similar conspiracies that left no evidence behind. I was the ghost in room 303, the invisible witness to betrayals that seemed perfect until someone was watching. And when the footage finally played in that courtroom, I didn't just haunt them, I burned their whole house down. The cameras are still recording. Trust requires witnesses now.